Now I'm going to talk about Chapter 7. All right, so Chapter 7 begins with Star talking about the fact that Khalil's funeral is the next day, and she's really fixated on what he's going to look like in the coffin, right? And I think this is because it's like his death will be real when she sees him. She's trying to imagine the strangeness of seeing him like that without that vivaciousness, that life force that defined him as a person. So the idea is almost, is surreal to her, the idea of a lifeless Khalil, because he was just defined by that vivacity. Um, and here, she describes in a little bit more detail when Chris touched her in the hallway and she flashed back to the police officer. And it was like truly realizing that Chris was white, right? So that she describes it, kind of acknowledging that's ridiculous. Like, of course, she knows he's white, but it's like that moment that she truly realizes what that means. And she realizes that she's begun equating Chris with 115 because they're both white men. And she says that being with Chris has begun to feel like a betrayal of the other men in her life, and a betrayal of herself, right? So her father doesn't know that she has a boyfriend. And the reason she hasn't told him is because Chris is white, right? So she's literally, betraying the main man in her life, her father. But she also feels like she's not really being true to herself, to her race, to her heritage by being with Chris. Okay, then there's the event that happens on the basketball court. So it starts off with Star describing kind of the conflicting feelings that she has about Chris, how being close to him as they play basketball distracts her from the game, distracts her from all of her misgivings about the relationship, right? So we get to see the way that, her feelings for Chris are very real, and that makes it more complicated. The fact that she really does like or, possibly love Chris, but that, it's complicated. And then Haley makes a racist comment, which she later tries to explain away as game talk, which says a lot about her, right? The fact that she is, kind of casually racist in a way that she herself maybe doesn't even register. She's not necessarily malicious about it, but she has the privilege of not having to constantly check herself the way that Star does. So the situation kind of mirrors the way that Haley unfollowed Star. If there's a situation that Haley doesn't want to deal with or an injustice she doesn't want to think about, she can just shut it out. She can just make excuses because she has the privilege to do so. Okay, and then when Haley and Maya ask Star if the Khalil in the news is quote unquote her Khalil, Star starts to imagine the way people at Williamson will perceive her if they find out that it is her Khalil, right? She describes this as the thug ghetto girl with the drug dealer. And so she denies knowing him, and in that moment describes it as a betrayal worse than dating a white boy, right? So she feels like dating Chris is a betrayal of Khalil and all the men in her life because it's as if she's rejecting the men of her own race. But denying the fact that she even knows Khalil erases the entire important role that he played in her life, right? So she says how it should be her job to keep Khalil and Natasha's memories alive, but instead she's denying them, right? She never talks about Natasha at all, and now she has completely denied Khalil's place in her life. All right, so then we get to see a little bit more of Uncle Carlos. He picks Star up early from school, and we get to see their relationship a bit more. We see his soft spot for her, right? He isn't hard on her in the same way that her parents are, but he lives in a totally different world. He has money, he doesn't live in Garden Heights, and his family is more protected, right? We know that Star's parents are hard on her in a way because they feel like they have to be in order to keep her safe, in order to make sure that she makes the most out of her life. She says that how when she was little, she even wanted to call Uncle Carlos Daddy, which emphasizes their closeness and the fact that Carlos stepped in as a father figure when her own father was in jail. Um, and then at the end of the chapter, Star admits to Carlos that 115 kept the gun on her while he waited for backup. And we see Carlos begin to kind of view the situation in a completely different way for the first time, right? He stares at her for a long time. He says, "I'm sorry," over and over. And it's almost as if he didn't truly believe that 115 was to blame until that moment, right? And so I think it really says something about the situation that even her own uncle needed to hear it from her in order to believe it wasn't Khalil's fault, right? This represents the way that the world is going to see it. That people will believe what they're told. They'll believe that Khalil was a drug dealer who was somehow the one who was in the wrong, that 115 was defending himself or enacting justice in some way, right? So the fact that even her own uncle believes this until he hears it from her, shows us how it's going to be up to Star to set the record straight, right? It's going to be up to her to make sure the world knows what really happened. Okay, and that's it for chapter 7.